I'd like to invite our final speaker for this evening. That's Piero. Piero is Director of Speech Technologies here in Zurich at Telepathy Labs.
Exactly.
Yes, we can see now. And I'd like to know, based on the context from the last talk, what comes to mind when you hear food?
Well, it depends on the context.
Okay. Well, on that
note, I'm Italian origin, and for me, food is very, very important.
Very important.
So, when it is about food, we are very picky.
Hopefully, the apero later will beat your tastes.
Yeah. Okay.
And also, I understand that you've worked on one of the smallest, or the world's smallest TTS.
Yeah.
How small exactly?
It was 2 megabytes, including code and data, and it was developed to run on very small mobile phones, Series 60 of Nokia, which was a very low-power device at the time. But then it was then used within the Android, the first version of Android system. They were hosted this TTS engine that we developed in Zurich, and I think Christoph is around, right? He was already in the team, and that was very important for the company itself. And we developed that for 9 languages, including 6 European languages and 3 Asian languages.
That's quite something.
That was remarkable. I'm talking about 2009. Huh?
Oh, very impressive. So, okay, we're looking forward to hearing your talk now on emotion detection.
Thank you very much. So, normally I start this kind of talks with an exercise. Since we are in a meetup context, normally I let people divide in groups and talk between each other in order to engage in a conversation and a little bit establish a mood, but we are too many. So I invite you to do this exercise mentally, or if you want to take notes on your smartphone, and after we talk, then we can discover if I give you some information about emotion. So the question you may want to ask yourself is about what is emotion for yourself? How do you define emotion? And I've been asking these questions to a number of friends, and I had very silly responses. So I guess it's not easy even for us to define what is an emotion. And then list the emotions that you come into your mind, just a number of those, and tell whether the emotion is important in your life or not. So this is very, somebody may think that emotion is secondary in the life, somebody may think it's very important. So that is something that we are going to talk about. As a matter of fact, emotion theories has been developed since almost 150 years, and it has not been a very easy path in the course of science. Of course, before science, there were other investigators looking for emotion. Mostly they were artists or writers. They were experts in how to feel emotion and how to convey an emotion in an artistic handcraft. But science started to analyze what was emotion. Around at the age of Charles Darwin, it was not exactly the first one, but it was the one that left the biggest track of records in publications. So for him, emotion is a response to a stimuli in the environment, and it serves an adaptive purpose. So we need to handle emotions, and we have emotions because emotions is a kind of a guidance for us to understand what is the important thing which is happening in the surrounding environment. Later on, a new theory emerged in which emotions were caused by interpretation of physiological reactions. So event triggers inside us physiological reactions. So it was a little bit more precise in terms of specification of what is an emotion. But it was a first type of analysis that were in depth on that. Later on, in 1915, emotions were analyzed in terms of really a specific part of the body. They were starting to formulate hypotheses that later on were mostly confirmed, that there is a part of the brain, the thalamus, that receives information from the output and then sends signals to stimulus that create a physiological reaction. Later on again, we are talking about 1962 now, we are close to our ages. in which the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion says that there are two different aspects. One is the physical arousal, and then also there is a cognitive aspect. So it's not only a physical reaction, but it's also our interpretation. So we must identify the arousal in order to feel the emotion. And in 1988, facial expressions came into big attention, in that emotions can be, were demonstrated, at least they were capable of showing up with experiments, that emotions can be, in a way, triggered by facial movements, and in a way that is a bit counterintuitive, in that when you smile in a venue and you force yourself to smile, you feel better. This is a sort of a reverse of the previous interpretations. And lastly, Lazarus' theory of emotion says that the sequence of events involves first a stimulus, then followed by a thought. So there are two parts that are involved. One is the physical stimulus that we receive, and one is the brain that does some kind of processing. But the real reference nowadays about how to interpret emotions is Paul Ekman, that worked a lot with nonverbal communication first. He was trying to understand how facial expression can be identified through emotion, through empirical research, and he found that there were about 10,000 possible facial expressions. Among those, only 3,000 were relevant for emotion. Then he found out some evidence that some emotions were universal across cultures. So anger, vulgarity, fear, joy, loneliness were found to be perceived and formulated and expressed the same way across different cultures. And he was the first to produce sort of a set of black and white images that were used to analyze the reaction of people to these features, to understand whether the reaction could be universal or not. And then in 1992, it was the first to show up that there were 6 basic emotions that can be shared among cultures and different populations. And these are the 6 that we are going to talk a bit more now. And out of his work, of the Paul Ekman, there was, in 2009, started a new TV series, which was very curious to see, in which the hypothesis that you can understand emotion of people just looking at the face, or looking at how some micro-expression happens in the body, also looking at the gestures of the hands, and also the way that we speak and the way we modulate the pitch. And based on this popular TV series, he was also producing a new company, and now is engaged in this company, that is giving consultancy to whoever wants to have it. But in the TV series, the idea is that the scientist, which is this actor here, is helping police investigations applying psychology. And I have a small chunk that I took from internet. I want to show you.
To be certain, we're talking about a premeditated, cold-blooded murder. He wants you to provide an independent assessment of intent.
We'll need the crime scene photos and the autopsy report.
But I thought you could tell somebody was lying just by looking at them.
The question is never simply if someone is lying. It's why.
Look, I already told the police everything, okay?
Tell us why you think you're here, James.
I was out for a run, and the police thought I was running from them, so they arrested me.
I heard you made your school's track team.
I didn't make it. I don't have tryouts.
Huh. What was your best race this year?
I don't know, probably against Jefferson last week. Why?
I ran hurdles myself, 110 meters. How'd your quads feel during the race?
Good, I guess.
And what about on your run the night you were arrested?
I felt fine.
Your teacher, Ms. McCartney, was found dead in her home. Have you ever been to her house before?
No, I've never been to her house before.
Ms. McCartney thought that you should be held back a year because she felt you were having some problems with your classmates.
What, I didn't want to get held back.
How'd you feel when you found out she was dead?
prayed for her soul. I can't know God's plan, but I didn't kill her.
Hurdles?
Could have run hurdles.
Please.
So you get a sense of his intent? When I asked James about his best race, he broke eye contact in order to remember and answer truthfully. When I asked him about his run the night of the murder, he never broke eye contact. He wasn't recalling a memory. He was lying.
But I thought most people avoid eye contact when they're lying.
No, it's a myth. And quite often they make more eye contact. They need to watch to see if you believe their lies.
The content analysis would suggest that James has been to Miss McCartney's house before. Question, have you ever been to her house? Answer, no, I have never been to her house. Rigid repetition like that is typical of a lie.
Okay, so you'll tell the mayor's office the murder was premeditated?
Looks that way. But when I asked him about his teacher's death, all we saw was this. Oblique eyebrows.
Sadness. Why would he be hiding sadness from her?
Looks like guilt to me.
No, it's possible he didn't mean to kill his teacher.
Excuse me?
Could have been an accident.
Okay. Okay, I indulged the mayor's office in letting you talk to the kid, but now you're just making wild guesses that have no basis in hard evidence. This was no accident. And personally, I think what you do is a joke. It's a friggin' carnival act.
Oh yeah, I get that a lot. You know, a moment ago, I saw you smile at your colleague, flash her a glance, then shift your gaze. She responded by raising her chin boss, revealing deep embarrassment.
Cal?
I'll take another wild guess. You two had a fling. She doesn't want a repeat performance because, you know, what with your wife and all. Well, you won't move on. Oh, no. Keep your fingers off your nose. Men have erectile tissue there. Itches when they're hiding something.
Okay, that's the story. Okay, so that was the funny series that was built around the theory of Paul Ekman. Another contribution for what we are going to talk now in a few minutes is about new dimensional models that were proposed around 1980. Based on that, the classification of emotions that we saw before, like in a class, a number of classes, now can also be specified in a continuous dimension, in two dimensions, in which one dimension is called the valence, which is connected with positiveness or negativeness, and another one on the y-axis, the arousal, so the level of excitement. In this plane, this two-dimensional plane, you can place the previous classes as we saw before. So these two are two different ways of representing emotion when it is about annotating natural events. A last thing that I wanted to mention is a bit of response of previous questions that we saw before. Most recently, thanks to MRI, there has been quite a number of research works that have been analyzing what is happening inside the brain about emotions. And the most frequent and accepted theory is that we are having the organization of the brain like can be represented with a hand, in which this part is representing the most ancient type of nervous system called the brainstem, which is controlling the breathing, the sleep or no sleep. Inside that, there is a limbic system, which is part of our sensory, but also associated with memory and emotions. And then around those two parts, there is the cortex, which is capable of connecting all the pieces together. So this part of the cortex is the most recent part in terms of evolution times. So it's about 5 million of years that has been started this development, while the limbic region, which is also in common with other species like mammals, has been developed more in the past, 250 million before, and then the previous part is more ancient. So the cortex is the youngest part of our brain, is the one that is capable of controlling emotion, but is also the slowest part. Because when there is a stimulus, the limbic region reacts very fast. something like in the order of milliseconds, because there is a reason for that. For evolutionary purposes, we need to decide what to do in case of an attack arrives to us, and this cannot wait for thinking. So this is also explaining a bit why certain parts of the brain are important, certain parts of the brain are less important, but also that the emotional part that is controlled by the limbic region are the basic emotions only. The more complex emotions related to empathy or communication with people are also distributed in other parts, including the cortex. Okay, so this is the first part is ending now. For the second part, I want to present what we just showed at the conference in Austria. Interspeech is the biggest conference in the world for speech. And we presented just this paper about investigating fusion techniques for utterance-level emotion recognition. What does this mean? This means that you can attempt to recognize emotions from text or from speech or even from the image. But then our belief, and this is why we presented this paper, is that the best thing to do is to do multimodal emotion detection. So this paper describes the way we did it. In a way, we are just addressing in this paper the fusion techniques. And we are presenting this approach based on two types of different systems. The first one on the left is for detecting emotion from text. The second on the right is for detecting emotion from speech, but we experimented with different fusion techniques. One is called early fusion, which combines the input of the text and on the speech channel into one single-dimensional vector. And then late fusion is a way of combining the output of the two systems. We experimented different ways of doing early and late fusion, and we compared results with state-of-the-art. In order to do this kind of evaluations, you need to have a reference data set. And normally, it's not easy to find a reference data set for emotions because it's a difficult type of task. So what we do normally when we compare our results with the state-of-the-art, we use a shared database. And in this case, we use this one, which is called IMOCAP, which means iterative, emotional, emotion capture, and blah, blah, blah. So in this database, you have actors that are sitting in front of a camera, and one of the two actors is also being tracked with special devices in order to also to keep the movement of the face, and the other actor is only acting and being recorded in voice and of course in text. I give you another small extract, 5 minutes. Yes, I can do that. Just an example of how this database is composed.
Utterly ridiculous.
We were very much younger then.
Very much sillier.
Mm-hmm. However, I do believe the real cause of that row was Peter Burden.
Oh, you knew there was nothing in that.
I knew nothing of the sort. You took presents from him.
Presents? It was a trivial little brooch.
It was bristling with diamonds, in the worst possible taste.
Not at all. It was very pretty. I still wear it often.
You went out of your way to torture me over Peter Burden.
I did not. You worked that whole thing up in your jealous imagination.
Well, you let him kiss you. You said you did.
Well, what of it?
What?
Okay, I have no time to show it entirely, but what I want to show is what is the type of transcription that you get out of it. So as you can see, I will use the mouse. So out of the recordings, you can get from this database the transcription of what they said. And this is one file. In another file, you get the classification of emotions. As you can see, there are 3 classifications in classes and 2 classifications in valence, arousal, which is the continuous space. Why you have 3 and 2? Because these are 3 different human annotators. And the fact is that most of the cases, they are not in accordance. So what we need to do when we handle this kind of database is to discard all cases in which there are at least in which there are differences that are not allowing you to even to take a majority rule. So since you have this tracked for per sentence, you can isolate the sentences in which there are accordance between annotators. And these are the results. We have been presenting that, analyzing what is the performance of the text only, and of the audio only, and then with different type of early and late fusion approaches. So the best result was for the late fusion tree. WA is weighted accuracy that accounts for the number of samples available. Not all samples are the same number for positive and negative samples, so that you need to weight a bit the accuracy. And then this is the comparison with the state of the art, in which we compared ourselves with known state of the art contributions, and we are quite close to the best one, but the best one is provided by Icon, and which is AudioPute plus text like us, so we're not far from them. Here in this graph, I show you the confusion between classes across 6 classes, and only for text. As you can see, there are many classes that are quite evidently, but the happy class is a bit superimposed with neutral and excited. For the speech, the situation is the same, although there is more distribution for the happy and neutral and frustrated. This is interpreted by us because of the data set is not very, very clean. About applications, I wanted to conclude my talk talking about application. I was consulting this very nice report, which is produced by a Swiss organization called World Intellectual Property Organization. This report is publicly available, and it speaks about the patents that has been presented across a very long period of time, starting from 1991 to 2016, and shows you the interest of companies to apply for patents. And one important part of this is, of course, the most of the patents were applied for transportation, which includes computer vision and autonomous driving, telecommunications. And in this, you can think that smart networks are important, but also personal computing devices, HCI, which is human computer interfaces. This is the class in which emotion detection is most likely producing some kind of application. And in terms of applications, I wanted to mention and also to credit Rosalind Picard, which is MIT Media Laboratory Director of Affective Computing, and is mentioning this kind of use cases that is a bit close to what we are doing in telepathy. We are not still having a product, but we are looking into that. Mainly how to provide feedbacks to the users of your application in a way that are not irritating, which are really understanding what is the user willing in this time, in this moment. Is happy, is irritated, is sad, so it's important that you have a nice type of feedback with respect to the customer. And that's all. These are my contacts. If you want to raise questions or send me emails, of course, I am happy to respond to questions like them.
Do we have time for a couple? Oh, yes. Here we go.
I was curious on your data collection methodology.
Yep.
So you use videos of actors acting. And,
it's not us, it's a public data collection. Huh?
Exactly. It's a data collection of actors acting and expressing emotion based on a script.
Not only a script. They provide you a scripted version and also an sort of a...
Improvise.
You give a theme and they improvise.
Okay. And you think this kind of a unnatural and exaggerated reaction from actors, which is typical way of acting, and the data collected in this database is enough to overcome the noise caused by this fiction? So meaning it's the interpretation of the actor of the script or the way, which is not a legitimate, if you want, or a natural reaction or emotion expressed.
Yeah, of course. You have always this risk, but the fact that the actors are capable of interpreting this emotion in a consistent way is already an advantage with respect to a normal person. If you use a casual speaker, it's even more difficult to label. And this is the reason why normally you use actors. Of course, it's not the ideal type of dataset for your real applications. For real application, you need to implement a possibly automated system for labeling because it's impossible, it's unfeasible. It's already very, very difficult to do that because you see the annotators are not converging on the evaluations.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Another question? If not, it's on me to thank the speakers again for bringing these.